Hey guys, so this week's video is another shout out from Russell Cook. Thanks for the suggestion, Russell. Today's video is actually going to be about Richard Trenton Chase, which you may have heard of before. He's pretty infamous. So we're just going to go over the basics of his killings, sort of where they spawned from, and his mental state, which I think heavily plays into why he did what he did. Even though obviously it's not an excuse for what he did, but I think it heavily plays into it. So Richard Trenton Chase was born on May 23rd of 1950. He actually only lived to be 30 years of age, and we'll go into that later. He was an American serial killer who killed 6 victims in the span of 1 month in Sacramento, California. He was given the nickname the Vampire of Sacramento because he drank the blood of his victims and cannibalized their remains. Now, Chase was a native of Santa Clara, California, and by the age of 10, he was already exhibiting all 3 signs of the Macdonald Triad, which are basically traits that most serial killers exhibit in their early life. Those 3 symptoms being bedwetting, arson, and cruelty to animals. In his adolescence, he was said to have been a very heavy drug user, and as he got older, he actually developed hypochondria, where he believed he had illnesses that he really didn't have. One of which was the thought that his heart continued to stop every once in a while, and that was based on the belief that someone had stolen his pulmonary artery, which obviously nobody can steal that, and if they do, you'd be dead, but this was in his mind what was going on. As a young adult, Chase began to capture, kill, and disembowel various animals, which he would then devour raw, sometimes mixing the raw organs with Coca-Cola in a blender and drinking it. He believed that by eating these creatures, he was preventing his heart from shrinking. In 1973, at the age of 23, he spent a brief time in a psychiatric ward. And in 1976, at the age of 26, he was involuntarily committed into a mental institution upon being in the hospital for having injected rabbit's blood into his own veins. It was there that the staff nicknamed him Dracula because of his blood fixation. Chase was very promptly diagnosed with schizophrenia, as I'm sure you can tell by the paranoid delusions he has already lived with for a lot of his life. And after a long treatment of psychiatric drugs, he was actually released from the institution in 1976 to his mother's custody, as he was no longer deemed a danger to society. Now, after his release, Chase's mother actually weaned him off of his medication, and she provided him with his own apartment. In mid-1977, Chase was stopped and arrested on a reservation in the Pyramid Lake, Nevada area, and his body was actually smeared with blood, and they found a bucket of blood in his truck. Now, the blood was determined to be cow's blood, so no charges were filed in this. However, it would be later that same year when Chase's murder spree would begin. On December 29th of 1977, he killed his first victim. He actually performed this killing via a drive-by shooting. The victim was Ambrose Griffin, who was a 51-year-old engineer and a father of 2. 2 weeks later, he attempted to enter the home of a young woman, but her doors were locked and he walked away. He later told detectives that he did so because he believed that locked doors were a sign that he was not welcome, and unlocked doors were an invitation to come inside. And if you know anything about vampires, I have to wonder if he knew that the legend is that vampires are supposed to be welcomed inside. They can't just come in your home. So I have to wonder if maybe the nickname Dracula made him come up with this. But it's interesting either way that just by locking her doors, she saved her own life. On January 23rd of 1978, Chase broke into a house and shot Teresa Wallen, who was 3 months pregnant at the time, 3 times. He then had sexual intercourse with her corpse while stabbing her with a butcher knife. So obviously this is a very sick man we were dealing with here. Not only is he killing people, which is heinous enough, but he is really adding just insult to injury by violating people like this. He then removed multiple organs, cut off one of her nipples, and drank her blood. He then stuffed dog feces from Wallen's yard down her throat before leaving. On January 27th, Chase entered the home of 38-year-old Evelyn Moreau. He encountered her friend Danny Meredith, whom he shot with his .22 caliber handgun, then took Meredith's wallet and car keys. He fatally shot Moreau and her 6-year-old son Jason, as well as her 22-month-old nephew David, before mutilating Moreau and engaging in necrophilia and cannibalism with her corpse. A visitor's knock on the door actually startled Chase, who fled in Meredith's car, taking the 22-month-old's body with him. The visitor alerted a neighbor, who then called the police, and they discovered that Chase had actually left perfect handprints and shoe prints in Moreau's blood. Luckily, Chase was arrested shortly after this. Now, in 1979, Chase stood trial on 6 counts of murder. Now, in order to avoid the death penalty, the defense actually tried to get him to be found guilty of second-degree murder, which would then result in a life sentence. Their case hinged on a history of mental illness and the suggestion that Chase's crimes were not premeditated. On the 8th of May in 1980, the jury found Chase guilty of 6 counts of first-degree murder, rejecting the argument that he was not guilty by reason of insanity. He was then sentenced to die in the gas chambers. Now, his fellow inmates obviously were aware of his extremely violent nature and therefore terrified of him. Apparently, they actually often tried to persuade Chase to commit suicide. And on December 26th of 1980, at the age of 30 years old, Chase was found in his cell dead. An autopsy found that he had committed suicide by way of overdose of prescribed antidepressants that he had been saving for weeks instead of actually taking as prescribed. So this is obviously a very, very sick man, a very, very, very sick story, and I cannot help but just feel awful for the families of the victims and them knowing what their family members had to have gone through, which is obviously horrible. This is a case that I had heard of, but I hadn't looked that much into prior to this request. And I have to be honest, this gave me like goosebumps more than probably most other cases besides like Albert Fish. It was just beyond heinous and just sick to imagine what must have been going through his mind to think that he was doing the right thing somehow. So hopefully none of you were eating while watching this. I should have put a disclaimer at the beginning, but So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit the like button below. If you have any suggestions for future videos, true crime or otherwise, please leave those in the comments below. And if you'd like to see more, please hit the subscribe button. I upload new videos every Wednesday. And other than that, I will see you guys next week. Bye.